Okay. Welcome to you, Gilbert Renaud. Okay, let's start. So, hello everyone. So today, I'm gonna do a live that's not going to basically use the television, because I thought we're going to talk about animation, and it's maybe simpler if I just use the right materials to show you. So, without further ado, so today's subject is going to be Osamu Tezuka and the origins of animation, you know, Japanese animation that we basically all love. And when it comes to Japanese animation, you can consider that it has a lot of Western influence. What I mean by Western influence is that, you know, Disney and also other Western cameramans and Western animations actually did have an impact on inspiring Osamu Tezuka when it comes to Japanese animation. Welcome Gwenaël, welcome Dominique. And such animation includes, of course, the earliest animations of Mickey Mouse, for example, and others like Betty Boop. For those who knows who that is. Welcome Mohammed. So why is it important to talk about Osamu Tezuka? Actually, this is going to be like a series of videos I'm doing, basically about the evolution of Japanese animation, you know, like basically how did it begin and throughout the ages toward, like, you know, today, where we have like big hits like Attack on Titan, like My Hero Academia, for example, for those who are interested. So yeah, welcome Ash. When it comes to animation, Osamu Tezuka was someone who really loved to work. Like he loved so much his work. Oh, welcome Patricia. So as Osamu Tezuka loved his work so much that he did work like really hard. Like even when he was sick, a little while before his death, well, his last words were basically begging the nurse to let him work before he passed away from, I believe, a cancer. And his legacy is going to influence on everything that comes after. You're going to see, I'm going to show you some example later of how he did not only influence manga but also animation. Welcome Nadia. So so a bit of biography will be really interesting now, I think. So first, well, he was at that time, you know, in the 40s and then in the 50s. And then in the 60s in Japan, you know, the post-war era was really great for artists of all kinds, because Japanese animation was starting and they needed someone to be the pioneer to push it beyond. And one of those companies, the Toei, aimed to become basically like the kind of new Disney, like a Japanese Disney. So they put a lot of budget on animation. And Osamu Tezuka was a mangaka at first, so he was drawing manga. And at first, what happened is that his manga named Son Goku will be requested by the Toei to be animated into a movie. And basically, he thought, hey, you know, manga is cool, and actually, I want to try Japanese animation too. So he actually jumped on. and a few years later he actually founded his own production, which would become Mushi Production. And Mushi Production is actually going to go in basically declare bankruptcy like a decade later, and then split into other studios of animation. Some of those maybe you know about it, like Sunrise, for example. I'm sure many of you know Sunrise for their Gundam series. I mean, Sunrise itself is a big part of Japanese animation too, you know. Oh, welcome, Miley. How are you guys today, by the way? Forgot to ask, but yeah, you know, if you want to share how you feel, and you know, this is Friday night, so let's just take it chill and take the moment to relax. So yeah, back to it. Yeah, back to it. So when it comes to Tezuka's Japanese animation, actually at that time, you know, there were no mold to actually set how Japanese animation should be produced. Actually, if you look at Hayao Miyazaki's manga eiga style, basically, which are manga but in movies instead of series, that and Osamu Tezuka's serial animation is going to be like the two examples that everyone else is going to follow from there on. Welcome, Hugh. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not sure. By the way, don't hesitate to actually talk and just comment and just, you know, share with me what you think. What maybe we could talk about, you know, if any of you knows Astro Boy. I think in Japanese is Tetsuwana Tomu, by the way. But Astro Boy, for example, for me, it was something, you know, just fantastic back in the days. It has been rebooted so many times because it is such an influence on the rest of the anime industry. After that, it has been adapted into movies, into even a Pixar movie, I believe, or a Disney movie. I'm not sure about this one, but yeah, I saw like Hollywood basically making a movie out of Astro Boy. So yeah, back into it. Osamu Tezuka's Japanese animation style includes many of the kind of codes that will be used to this day. What I mean by code is actually, for example, big eyes. Okay, hold on. Like this, for example. You see here is the #1 volume of Full Metal Alchemist. You see the eyes, the large eyes that are inspired by Disney characters and earlier your American cartoons. You know, this is something that Osamu Tezuka was one of the first to use, and his influence, because Astro Boy was a huge hit in Japan and was also the first Japanese anime to be directly made into an English dub. Actually, if you guys think that English dub is so new, is so recent, well, it's actually not the case at all. Like, it's actually pretty old. Because it has. Oh, welcome, Jan. Because actually Japanese animation has been dubbed for a really long time, but I think maybe there were not so many Japanese anime. It was not that popular in the US for a long while before becoming mainstream again with Netflix recently. We all know that Netflix and Attack on Titan were like some of the hit platforms and series for which the mainstream audience began to watch it. But before, of course, there was the 80s and the 90s with the Dragon Ball Z trends and Pokemon. Of course, Pokemon is also Japanese animation. All that to say that today we're actually going to really be focusing on how Osamu Tezuka's way of working changed forever and set the mold for the Japanese industry when it comes to anime. So many of you actually probably heard about the fact that when you work as an animator in a Japanese anime studio, it's really a low salary. Some people are stressed by the work and the deadlines are hard. Basically, it's not a dream work. Okay, nobody really feels like it's such a great job that everyone is having fun every day. But this actually began in the earliest stages of the development. Oh, welcome, Yannick. And what I mean by the earliest stage of development, I mean that there were no really big hits of Japanese animation before Osamu Tezuka's works. Like his works were the ones that were made into more interesting ways, because before him, animation was basically used by the Japanese, the Japanese Empire actually for education purposes. Like animation was basically a tool of propaganda in some ways, where patriotic feelings and principles were like educated into the people with anime. But Osamu Tezuka was both agnostic, which means that he is not a practitioner of religion, unlike most Japanese of his era, and also, of course, someone who is not really a big fan of war. So yeah, actually, for those who watched my lives before, I think last week I actually told you about the Curse of Tezuka. The Curse of Tezuka is actually a term that we refer to when it comes to knowing the cost and the production of a single anime episode versus its profit. Because at the earliest stages, okay, for those who don't know, basically 100 yen in Japanese yen is basically $1 US. And at that time, it cost Osamu Tezuka basically 2.5 million Japanese yen to produce one episode of Astro Boy. And then he will sell that episode basically like 500,000 yen to the television channel who wants to broadcast it. You see, there is a big deficit of profit here. Basically, to make any kind of profit, he will need to sell it to at least 5 channels. And in the 60s and the 70s, there's not that many channels. When you think about it, like it's not like today where we have like 100 TV channels per state or per province. Welcome, David Osoris. So yeah, the cost was actually so low that they had to find other means of how to make profit, because of course creating animation and selling it to TV channels, it's not something that is very profitable. And Osamu Tezuka was fine working with it, but of course Mushi Production of his will go into bankruptcy 10 years later. So it really shows that from the beginning, ever since the beginning, actually, it has always intended to be a very, very competitive scene. So what is this concept that helped develop the more profitable aspect is what the Japanese calls kyara. Okay, kyara, what is kyara? Okay, kyara is basically the Japanese word of the English word for kyarakta, which basically is character. So Japanese animation is mainly focused on characters. And why do we focus on characters? As simple as it may seem, but it's basically the idea is to sell goodies and sell products based on the animation series. For example, okay, I'm gonna show you here. It's an Android figurine of Senku from Dr. Stone that I have here. And this figurine actually brings profit to the animation studio that made this very, very cool anime. Welcome on. And then to make sure that this Kara concept actually works, we had to create animation that will focus on the characters, that will show the characters as the main highlight. You see, when you look at Studio Ghibli's animated movies from Hayao Miyazaki, you can see that it's a very different vibe. It's a very different trend of animation. It shows a lot of the big scenery. Hayao Miyazaki loves to draw scenes, like other movies, like Makoto Shinkai's movies, also loves to show real life scenes that are not necessarily focused on the characters. But when it comes to profit, character goods are something that the studios just cannot do without, you know, because they need to make some money at some point. So hold on. Actually, this is a very good example of the use of Kara. You know, here on my cup is the mascot of the 2008 Beijing Olympics character, and you know, using mascot, it's also part of this Kara concept, where you use the character and you show the character, and then you want to sell the character, and you basically give it to the audience who see the character. So in the earlier stages of development of the anime industry, Osamu Tezuka thought, you know, this is something that's that's going to be very important for the future if we want to even make something happen in the anime world. Okay, now that we, you know, and this, why we call it the Curse of Tezuka, is actually because even to this day, the anime studio uses his example. Like they use what he said as a mold to create this kind of this, you know, to create animation in general. They use this low profit and like good budget but low profit when selling it to television channels kind of mold. And why we call it a curse, because it has a lot of bad sides. You know, it makes animators very stressed. Their pay is like really, really low, and also, you know, to become an animator you have to basically live in the big city where the studio is, and those big cities are not necessarily very affordable. Like we're talking about Kyoto Animation, for example, we're talking about Toei, or we're talking about all those big animation studios which are set in big cities where life can be really, really expensive. And now you're making this low salary. It just creates such a hard time. But if you look at the credits in an anime episode nowadays, like for example, if you take My Hero Academia or even Attack on Titan, go look at the credits at the end of the episode. You're going to see a lot of foreign names, such as a bunch of Korean names or a bunch of Vietnamese names. Why? Because those people are not, you know, Japanese, and as such, these studios basically pays them to do like this kind of cheap labor and low cost labor to save money. And as sad as it sounds, but that is a reality in Japan, where you have people from other countries that are less comfortable to live in. They want to find a job in Japan, they come in Japan, and then they have to do maybe the worst jobs, because the normal everyday Japanese person is not going to want to do those jobs. So more and more we see this kind of job going into the hands of the foreign workers. But let's keep this foreign worker subject of Japan for another day. Going back into Osamu Tezuka's animation techniques. So actually he created some techniques that I'm going to show you, and that you're going to easily understand how they impacted the animation style of recent anime. One of the first rules he introduced to the anime world is that if you don't need to actually animate something, don't animate it. You know, you can see it in a very good example. Most of the anime that are based off mangas. I'm not talking about stuff like Gurren Lagann or Evangelion, where it's animation made to be anime, but more for adaptations, anime adaptation of successful manga like Gambling School, Kakegurui, if you know about it. That kind of title basically shows this trend very well. Basically, you see the characters in a big image, kind of, and basically you don't see them as animated as Hayao Miyazaki's movies. Welcome, Marco. And when it comes to not seeing them actually moving, it means what? Lower budget. You cut the workload of your workers by doing this, and you actually try to animate only what needs to be animated. For example, many scenes in Gambling School, even today, you see the character in a big image and they don't move. Nothing is animated except the mouth to talk. And this is something Osamu Tezuka decided some 60 years ago. No, is that, yes, 60 years ago he actually decided that it will be like this, where if a character talk, you only animate the mouth and sometimes the eyes, of course. So and to jump into the next kind of trend that he created is the use of recycled images. Basically, what that means is that the studio will begin to create many sequence of images that are repeated throughout the episodes. Like they just recycle it and then save costs, save time, and just reuse those sequence. For example, openings. Okay, the opening song of every modern anime basically recycles the same images and puts it back. And sometimes they even show, like in the case of some anime like One Piece made by the Toei, you can see that in the opening song sequence of the One Piece anime, you see some scenes of the actual anime itself. You know, they just inject that into the opening. This way you have less stuff to animate. Such sequence can also be used like in a repetition to make something last longer. I'm going to show you an example with my small stuff. Okay, so this here, okay, is the background. Okay, it's basically the Champs-Élysées. It's a background. It's a chocolate box for those who want to know. And this here is a Shiba dog. Okay, what it means is that if you make the Shiba dog move, it's going to move like this. Just imagine that the legs are moving. Okay, so you show this Shiba moving in a fixed image. So you can just recycle the walking movement of the Shiba constantly, and then you can easily save a lot of cost, a lot of time, and you can just keep showing it walking and then just move the image. You know, it just move like that, and just like this, you just move the image and make the dog repetitively move in the same way. Welcome, Luke. You just do like this, and you can basically create the illusion of animation movements. And this is what we call multi-planar images. Basically, it's an image that has more than one plane of movement, that they are basically separated. Okay, welcome Mathieu. Okay, so yeah, amongst others, there's this technique will be used a lot in Astro Boy. If you want to look at the episodes to see what I mean, you can actually go on YouTube and see a bit of the animation. You know, even today in modern animation, you have a lot of sequence like this. For example, in the a lot of shonen anime. Actually, no, I have a better example of repeated sequence like this and recycled sequence like the previous example. When you look at series like for example, like everything that has to do with Beyblade and, you know, other Super Sentai kind of stuff, you know, animation for children, even Pokemon episodes. How many times have you seen the same animation used to show Ash Ketchum throw a Pokeball? You know, that's what I mean by recycled sequence. They just use that again and again and again, and you know, the original animation was destined for children, so of course it didn't bother anyone. And when you think about even more recent stuff like Sailor Moon, you can see that every time Sailor Moon transforms, it's always the same sequence. And that's, you know, it may seem to be very obvious, but that's something Osamu Tezuka has kind of created. It was one of the first to ever do that. So they just put like all the complicated images in a bank of moving images and then just reuse them throughout the years. Osamu Tezuka will not stay with the Toei for very long. Actually, when he made Mushi Production, it was to kind of become a rival and competitor to Toei. I mean, I have no idea why he did not get along with them, but I would suppose that Toei, being a very greedy and big company, I'm sorry for those who really likes that company, kind of don't fit well with his personality, because Osamu Tezuka is a very chill and artistic person. Welcome, Tristan. And of course, Astro Boy is okay, yeah. Astro Boy is also new in Japan in the way that it was a daily animation. Basically, you spend like a few months ahead of time to produce each episode, and then they air every single day. Today, if you think about it, maybe we have a very rare anime episodes. But for example, SpongeBob, okay, in the US, SpongeBob was also a daily cartoon where you get every day. That's actually very different from when you look at modern anime, when it's like 1 week, one episode a week. But of course it takes a bunch more of time. Of course, Astro Boy, I think it took much less time to actually animate, even if, you know, the technology at that time was pretty old. So you cannot really say that, you know, the technology of Astro Boy was the animation of Astro Boy, was bad at that time. By any means, it was high quality. Okay. Okay. Now to introduce you actually another technique of animation. Okay, I'm going to use this here and use the same Shiba here. Okay, so imagine this, the white board here is the behind, and one of the other techniques he actually was one of the first to use is to zoom onto the character. Let's say that this white board is an image of a city or a street, if you want, and it's not moving, like it's not moving at all. And then you have a zoom on the character only, on the character like this, And then what effect does it create? It actually creates an effect of movement, you know. Basically, it shows that the character is walking up to you. At that time, you have to understand one thing is that the concept of 3D, of like, you know, effect of depth in Japanese animation was not widespread. When you think about the first manga, okay, the manga were basically very 2D style. Manga was basically kind of counterculture to American influence of field of depth of thing. And Osamu Tezuka at that time just added this kind of sequence. In Astro Boy, you can see many images where you see a car basically moving toward the camera, while the background stays immobile. And by playing with this difference between the character and the background, it actually also emphasizes on the character, because the character is what's cool, you know. At that time, we're going to show you that a character is cool because it is moving. Something is cool because it is animated. Something has vibes, movements, is alive. So that's very cool. We're going to see later that with old stuff like Space Battleship Yamato from Leiji Matsumoto, if I'm not wrong, that the trend that what moves is cool is going to completely change. I'm going to talk about it in a future life, but for now let's focus on really the idea of animation. And let's actually just drinking. So yeah, back to it. Yeah, Astro Boy is of course not his only movie. Okay, one of the greatest movies of the earlier days of animation was Metropolis. And for those who don't know it, there's a remake version of it, like a new version with color, with better images, with better sound, and basically it was better animated, but it keeps the art style of Osamu Tezuka. Go see Metropolis, the movie of, I think it was 2001, so it's pretty old, but because it is a movie, unlike kind of anime series, its budget it's much higher in comparison. So of course the animation is much prettier to see. Of course Osamu Tezuka is now gone on. I mean, we still have the chance to see people like Hayao Miyazaki still alive among us today. And it's actually sad when you think that, you know, anime was not created so long ago. You know, it's something that dates from the last century, or the ending of the 19th century. And so all of those techniques that Osamu Tezuka used, actually, they did not come from nowhere. They came from him. That was kind of my message. Welcome, Maxim. So yeah, that's kind of my message today, is that all those techniques that he used, all those ways of working around animation, how to animate, how to use the camera to bring movement, to create depth, to create different types of images, those things are something that belongs to him, and I think he should be remembered for contributing to those. I'm gonna go ahead and repeat my example with Kakegurui, or Gambling School. If you read the Gambling School manga and then you watch the anime, what you get with the animated anime adaptation is basically the manga with colors, with sound, and with some very minimal movements. Because, you know, most of Gambling School's anime episodes is basically like, you know, an image let's bring, it's like, you know, oh, you're impressed, aren't you? And you see the big image basically moving along the camera, and so to show you like the entire image of it. Well, if you think about Ghibli Studios animation style, like when the girl basically walks, her hairs are like moving in the air. When you think about Gurren Lagann, everything basically moves. You know, everything made by Sunrise is also a lot of about movement. You have a body of mecha, and then this mecha body basically kind of moves around. Actually, this basically concludes our episode today about Osamu Tezuka. I think it was a really soft introduction. I think this series of lives about the pioneers of the anime industry is something I want to bring to you guys. And next time we're going to basically talk about Hayao Miyazaki. It's not going to be next week, but we're definitely going from the anime series to the manga eiga style of thing. Manga eiga, once more, eiga means movie. Okay, it's just movie made with this manga style, that Hayao Miyazaki is going to be like the kind of big shot, where Osamu Tezuka is the big shot of episode anime. So yeah, that's about it, I think. But of course, there were many other people, many other influence than Osamu Tezuka and then Hayao Miyazaki. Later on, there is going to be a lot of big studios creating their own style, making, you know, even today, if you look at Netflix own anime series, it's always like in kind of 3D. That's also like, you know, something very new, and that's in terms of cost efficiency, of course, it's much lower than 2D animation like My Hero Academia, because you just basically, you know, in 3D animation, you just basically take the character, make it move, and, you know, once you draw the character in a 3D model, you can always use him. You just need to like adjust the movement of the face. You don't have to redraw the character again compared to 2D animation. So it's a lot less time consuming when it comes to production. Okay, it's going to be a bit short today, but I hope next time more people, especially fans of Ghibli movies, are going to turn up, because I have a lot of interesting stuff to talk about Hayao Miyazaki, why he doesn't like the otaku culture, why he doesn't like anime in general, like what he sees wrong in the otaku culture, you know, all those things. So yeah, thank you for watching me today, and see you next time. Next time I may have television images to show, but since there's a lot of stuff to talk about, and I'm going to maybe make it like a bit longer than my usual lives. Okay, bye bye everyone.